All right, so today we're going to be talking about our top 5 favorite college basketball teams since we've been watching college basketball. So for me, that's going to go about 30 years back. For JD, just a touch longer than that. How you doing, JD?
I'm doing great and very excited to do this show because I get to go back to all the teams that I talked about many, many times. And you would say, don't really remember. I wasn't born yet for that, but very excited to do this show and very excited to hear the new AP poll.
Yes, new AP poll. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video. We're doing college basketball content all year long. So, the new AP poll, the first one of the season, comes out. And for the first time in program history, Purdue is the preseason number one. Very close at the top. Not much separation between them and Houston. Florida was third. UConn was fourth. And then the rest of the top 10, St. John's at 5, Duke at number 6, Michigan at 7, BYU at 8, Kentucky at 9, Texas Tech at 10, and honorable mention, the 11th team, Louisville, which was a little bit of a surprise considering how high they were on the ESPN rankings.
So the same three teams were on the ESPN rankings and then obviously very high up there were UConn and St. John's. I don't recall if they were 4 and 5.
When we did it, I believe it was 4 and 5. I think Houston and Florida were flipped.
Yeah,
Um, I know Duke was they'd moved up in their most recent edition, but I think they were only as high as 10th in
yeah,
their last one.
or we had to go even past the top 10 in
They
order to
were
get to
initially
our
12th.
boys at Duke.
Yeah, initially 12th. And Louisville had moved up from 7th to 6th, but in the AP poll they're 11th. So absolutely none of this matters, by the way. None of it. Because we know the preseason AP poll, half these teams are not going to be ranked by the time we get to March. So, but it does make it fun. It makes it fun. And then, this is, you got to have something to build up the games early season. If nobody was ranked, you wouldn't have these top 10 matchups in the first week of the season. So, the only other thing I want to know, ACC wise, North Carolina sneaks in at number 25, and NC State was, I guess, the 26th or 27th team in the poll.
All right, but we're recording again on Monday, October 13th, which means we're another week closer to actual games, and it couldn't be excited. But this should be a fun show because I'm very curious to see what 5 you picked compared to the 5 that I picked, and then of course because I'm older, I have a few honorable mentions that I think have to get in there. It's harder to do 5, because I got a few years on you. So, all right.
It's true. True. All right, I'll go first. We don't know. We don't know who, as JD said, we don't know who each other picked here. But I want to say this. If there's a team that you picked as well as me, or vice versa, we'll just get that out the way once you announce it and go from there. I'm going to go, I don't have it in any particular order. So I'm going to go from my most recent team and then work my way back into the past. That's how I'm going to do it. You can do it however you want to. Okay.
I did rank them,
Oh,
and so I do have a clear number 1, but which will come as no surprise. So,
fair enough. Fair enough.
and
So,
by the way, for those of you listening, again, we would say subscribe. It helps us grow. Please like us. That helps us grow. And let's get all the mystery out of the way. I'm JD. That's Jack. He's my son. For those people last year that discovered it, like by the time March Madness came around, yes, we are related and we do like to argue with each other. So,
all right. Now that that's out the way, thanks for the disclaimer. My first team, because we clearly went about this in different ways, but that's the beautiful thing about this. I went with, and again, for me, this is no particular order. Most recent team, Auburn of last year. I just thought they were so much fun to watch, and I was making my list, and I was having a tough time getting my fifth team. I will say that. So I guess if I were to admit something, this would probably be my fifth favorite team. But thinking back on last year's Auburn team, you had, I guess, first of all, I got to put this out there. They started off the year with, on their way to play Houston, Jackie Howard and Jaheim Hudson got into a fight, and they had to bring the plane back to Auburn and then go to Houston. And I was so confident that because of that among with other reasons, Houston was going to win. I put down big money on Houston, and Auburn won that game because of, in part, Tahad Pettiford. And that was the sign of things to come. But it wasn't Tahad Pettiford who was the star of the team. It was Janai Broome, and he was awesome. And they were 27-2 last year until they lost 3 of 4 at the end of the season. But they were just like, they're fun to watch. You know, not just Janai Broome and Pettiford, who was a lot of fun, but you had the ultimate wild card of Chad Baker-Mazara, Dylan Cardwell giving them energy, Denver Jones and Miles Kelly giving them defense and shooting. And then obviously Bruce Pearl, and then Stephen Pearl, just adding to the fun on the sidelines. I was just like, let me throw in a recent team, and I was thinking back to last year. They were a lot of fun to watch for me.
Can't argue with the fun part of that, but I think we're going to, for my first team, I'm going to take you before you were born right away too. And it will come as no surprise. Duke. 91-92 Duke team. Without a doubt, my favorite team. You've got Bobby Hurley slamming the floor with both hands, getting the team pumped. You've got Christian Laettner, who will go, it's still talked about as the shot in NCAA March Madness history. You've got Grant Hill, who threw the ball for the shot. And you have Thomas Hill among, 4 of the 5 starters there. It was just a great team. So the game that is known for them as, the great, probably for me, the greatest college basketball game of all time is when they beat Kentucky in I want to say the Elite Eight overtime win, 104-103 on the pass from Grant Hill to Christian Laettner, turns, shoots, scores, comes running back down the court like this. And they show it every year now. So that goes back to 91-92. And I don't think you were born yet. So, and just a little footnote there. They went on to beat in the finals the Fab Five. They took them out completely by 20 points. There was so much momentum coming out of the Kentucky win. So, without a doubt, they're my number one college basketball team of all time.
Number one. All right, I like it. All right. For me, my next team, like I said, not in order, but I think actually this could be my number one team if I'm going to say that on the spot here. And then I'm still going to continue going back in time. The 2015 Duke Blue Devils, who went 35-4, led by Jahlil Okafor, Justice Winslow, Tyus Jones, and Quinn Cook. And they also got a lot of help from Emile Jefferson and Matt Jones and Grayson Allen. Obviously, at the end of the season, what he did in the championship game.
I had to go in another room. You guys wouldn't let me stay there. I was getting so nervous.
I wasn't there. It was my freshman year of college, so I was at Northeastern at the time. But my favorite part about watching that team was how many times they would be down late in the second half and stage late last minute comeback wins, oftentimes led by Tyus Jones, who earned the nickname Tyus Stones because of that. And I was looking, I definitely missed some, but there were notable comeback wins against North Carolina, Virginia, Wisconsin, and I think two or three more that I just couldn't find when I was doing my research. And Tyus Jones and Justice Winslow were my two favorite players on that team. Tyus Jones he would average like 8 points a game when they would play lesser competition, but it seemed like every big game he would score 20 and have these late buckets. And Justice Winslow just gave them so much energy, and it was like every time he would make a bad play or a turnover, he would always come back and either get a block or a steal. It just turned his aggression up another level. They were just a lot of fun to watch on the run to the national championship.
All right. So my number 2 team goes to 93-94. And again, still weren't there, but you've heard me talk about it until you don't want to listen to me anymore. And that is the Arkansas Razorbacks and the lost art of defense. And this was Coach Nolan Richardson's team, known as 40 Minutes of Hell. And they pressed full court for 40 minutes. And it was, and by the way, just in case you're interested, they beat Duke for the national championship that year, playing this style. And so much fun to, because you're waiting for your team to score on offense and you're looking for the play. This was completely different for college basketball. It was a show of power through defense. And the star player on that team, the big nasty Corliss Williamson, a name that I'm sure you know very well. Corliss was just a big guy that could get up and down the court and participate in 40 Minutes of Hell. And many teams have tried to bring it back and, the lost art of defense, but this was, so I'm going with the Arkansas Razorbacks as my second favorite team of all time.
There was West Virginia a few years back. St. John's, I wouldn't quite describe as the same, but boy, did they have a lot of pressure last year defensively, and just created havoc. There have been some teams, but no one's done it to win a national championship, I would say, since then. So, yeah, that's a good one. All right, my third team, going to 2013. I will say this. I had a little bit of a difficult time picking the year for this team, whether I was going to go with the 2012-2013 edition or the 2013-2014 edition, where they won more games but were eliminated earlier. But I went with the team that went to the Final Four, the Wichita State Shockers, who that season they went 30-9. They lost in the Final Four to eventual champion Louisville by 4 points. And they were led by Clay Anthony Early, who went to junior college and is from an area where we're from, which was pretty cool because that just does not happen. He was their leading scorer. He averaged 14 and 5. They also had Malcolm Armstead, who had a pretty good role as their guard, 10 points, 4 rebounds, 4 assists. Carl Hall was their big man, 13.7 rebounds. And then they had contributions from these freshmen who you may have heard of, like this guy, Ron Baker, who played pretty well. He got hurt his freshman year. He had a bigger role moving forward with the Shockers. And then this other guy who was kind of still in the NBA, he's kind of had a fairly good career, Fred VanVleet. You may have heard of him. And, I mean, pardon the pun, but they really came out of nowhere, the Shockers. Nobody thought this team was going to be a Final Four team or anywhere near that. And they had a run when, especially those two guys, VanVleet and Baker, were part of the program under Coach Greg Marshall, where they became a team, a mid-major that we paid attention to. And the following year, they were, I think, 35-1. They lost their first game in kind of an ironic fashion where the year I'm talking about, they were in the 8-9 matchup and they beat the number 1 seed. I think it was Gonzaga, may have been Kansas. We could have that wrong. But then the following year, they lost as the 1 seed to either the 8 or 9 seed Kentucky. So it kind of flipped on them. But a lot of people felt Kentucky was really underseeded that year. But they were a lot of fun to watch, especially those three guys, Early, Baker, and Van Vliet.
Good choice. Good choice. Okay, going back even further. Probably some of the teams I'm going to reflect on are teams that changed the culture of college basketball. So the next team for me is had to pick one because they didn't win the national championship, but I'm going to take the 1982-83 Phi Slamma Jamma Houston Cougars. And they culturally, the whole idea was run fast and dunk. And in fact, I think who did they lose? They might have lost or had a great matchup against Dr. Duncanstein himself from Louisville. It'll come to me. This is why we have the young buck and the old man. So Hakeem Olajuwon and Clyde.
Daryl Griffith. I looked it up. I didn't know who it was. Does that sound right?
Yeah, it sounds absolutely right. And he was like 6'4" and just did posterizing dunks. And so imagine them playing against a team that all they did was dunk. It was so much fun. It was like watching an ABA game at that time. It was so much excitement. In addition to Hakeem and Clyde, you had Alvin Frank, Larry Mishaw, and Michael Young. And it's who that team loses unbeatable. And they wound up losing the national championship to a team that was highly the dog in this, NC State. And NC State won 54-52, which adds to the magic of you can't beat Phi Slamma Jamma. And by the way, their uniforms by mid-year had on the uniform Phi Slam, the warm-ups, not quite the uniform, Phi Slamma Jamma. It was so much fun to watch them. And then, of course, that finals where they should have won. And, it's as iconic a moment in NCAA March Madness in terms of Duke and the shot, this upset, and the NC State coach.
Jimmy Valvano.
Jimmy V. And so you had that moment where, he's just seen running out on the court. And that too has become a magic moment. But Phi Slamma Jamma, no question for me, is my number 3.
All right. That's a good one. For sure. Definitely a culture changer. And as you said, we watch that clip every March Madness. They make sure to show it to us. My 4th team is the 2011-2012 Kentucky Wildcats. This team, well, they were a lot of fun. They were a lot of fun for me to watch. I didn't realize this until doing my research. They went 38-2. They won the national championship and they beat Louisville in the Final Four. Did not remember that at all, which is pretty wild, just considering, a couple of years ago we had Duke, North Carolina in the Final Four. That must have been pretty crazy in Kentucky to have that going on. But their two losses were by 1 point apiece. They lost in the SEC tournament to Vanderbilt, and they lost by 1 point in. It's not the Christian Laettner shot, but we've seen it because of the circumstance, being a regular season game early on. But we've seen it quite a bit. The Christian Watford shot, where he pulls up from deep for 3 to win the game against Kentucky. I believe that game was in Indiana, or a neutral site game. But that was it. Those are the only 2 games they lost. And they were led by Anthony Davis, who, if we make another video later on, JD, of our favorite college players, he would be on my list for sure. I went and looked this one up. Anthony Davis averaged 4.7 blocks per game. He had at least one, maybe 2 games of 10 blocks, and he didn't qualify because he was only there for 1 year. But if he did, you had to have 225 blocks to qualify for the all-time blocks per game leaderboard. If he did qualify, which he wasn't that far off, he was only like 40 blocks away, he would have been tied for 5th all-time in blocks per game. Which honestly said a lot about how, some of these other guys were blocking some shots. He averaged 6.1 steals and blocks per game. He was outstanding. Then you also had Michael Kidd-Gilchrist, who was a ton of fun to watch. His energy, defense, transition buckets. Terrence Jones, who I liked a lot at the time, averaged 1.3 steals and 1.8 blocks. How often is it you can average 1.8 blocks per game and you're nowhere close to your team's leading shot blocker? He was 3 blocks away per game from being their leading shot blocker. And then Deron Lamb was their best outside shooter. Darius Miller gave them good minutes as one of really the only upperclassmen who played on that team. And then lastly, Marquise Teague, Jeff Teague's younger brother, was the point guard on that team. And I think, to wrap it up, it was an important early championship for Calipari in the sense that it was only a couple years into the one and done era where he had been restocking every year, getting these new freshmen, and it was a proof of concept for them that it could work, that you could have freshmen who end up winning a national championship. It didn't end up happening again, somewhat due to bad luck, somewhat due to whatever, but this was a big win for Coach Calipari, and a lot of fun to watch them especially play defense.
So I'm going to play off of the idea of watching freshmen and say that the Fab Five of 91-92 Michigan, and that's with Chris Webber, Jalen Rose, Ray Jackson, Juwan Howard, and Jimmy Kane. Now, as I said earlier, they wind up losing the finals to Duke. But their 30 by 30s have been done on ESPN about this team because this was a culture shift in watching college basketball. Chris Webber's coming on with headphones during warm-ups, baggy, loose-fitting clothes. They all had black sneakers
and socks.
And socks. And very much so when asked, what were they listening to? It was the integration of hip-hop music into college basketball. And so culturally, Steve Fisher's team and 5 freshmen, probably, so, it's interesting because when you hear my number 5, I'm going to say there was this period of a year or two that college basketball really changed. Although there are other moments, but that's my 4th.
Well, at the end, we'll do a little recap because I've noticed with myself and you that there's a pocket of years. Like I've got this pocket from my next team's going to be 2011. I'll say that right now. So 2011 to 2015, I had 4 of my teams in there. And for you, it's 92 to 94 so far, primarily. And
right. Absolutely.
All right. 1 second. The 2011 UConn Huskies, Kemba Walker. There's just no way you could make a list of your favorite teams to watch without that run. I'm sorry. I had to do it. There's no way around it. Kemba, it was just all Kemba. I know you could just say, it was all about Kemba, but the run they won. They
The
went
run.
from they were kind of on the borderline of being on the bubble for the NCAA tournament at the start of the Big East tournament. They win 5 straight, including talk about iconic shots. The step back that Kemba hits in, I believe it was the third game of the Big East tournament over poor Pittsburgh center Gary McGee, who was just out on an island trying to guard Kemba Walker. And at that time, it was the worst place you could possibly be. And he drains that shot. They go on to win the next, I guess that would be 8 games after that. It was not just Kemba. You know, he got some help from Jeremy Lamb, a young Shabazz Napier. And more importantly, as a team, they were, according to KenPom, 15th best defensive team in the country. They won a lot of their games, especially in the NCAA tournament, in low-scoring games where Kemba would just show up late, cardiac Kemba, and save the game, and their defense would just keep them in it. And it was the fact that they did that is just remarkable. So it was just really hard for me to make a list and not have them on it.
And I thought long and hard about it. And then I said it would be a different show in which I would probably say, who were your 5 favorite players?
Mm-hmm.
And I would have picked Kemba Time, which we've talked about many times, is one of the most remarkable runs. But that would probably mean that I would get into Glenn Rice's run in the tournament, where he averaged 30 points per game for Michigan. But my 5th team is going to fit right in that era, again, because it is UNLV. And the year before Duke beats them, they were invincible in the 90-91 season. That's Jerry Tarkanian chewing on his towel, Larry Johnson, Stacey Augmon, and they had they won their championship in 1990. No one could touch them. They were crushing teams. They were they're just extraordinary. I think they were 34-1, and they in the championship year. But then in the upset of all upsets, because Duke got crushed by them in that year. But that UNLV team was just as monstrous as Arkansas was on defense, was as amazing as UNLV was on offense. And so for me, that would be my 5th team there.
All right. Let us know who you guys have in the comments below. Who are some of your favorite teams? It was interesting, you know, when you mentioned who are you talking about? Houston. You said they were like a cultural change, and then I was thinking Michigan, but I didn't want to say anything because I was like, maybe you got Michigan, you know, coming up. So I just wrote it down, and then I said, all right. But it was like, obviously, I wasn't alive when this was happening, but in seeing how they've talked about these teams, I'd say you nailed it with Michigan, Houston, UNLV. Those are the teams I think of in terms of changing like the landscape of college basketball, and just some of those guys are like really well known now for their time in college or post-college.
So that's a really good segue, because being that I have at least twice as much years on you, I'm going to talk a little bit about honorable mentions because they changed the game. So the first one for me is definitely going to be Don Haskins and the Texas Western Miners.
Yep.
And a great fun movie. You know, they beat Adolph Rupp with Pat Riley in the backcourt. But they were.
Pat Riley played for Kentucky?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't know that. Continue.
I'm telling you, this is well before your time.
Absolutely. I only remember Pat Riley. I know he played a little bit in the NBA, right? Have that right?
Sure.
And then I remember, Pat Riley, coach of the Lakers, and then he was with the Knicks, the Heat. Now he's been with the Heat for a long time.
So why the Texas Miners were so historical is it was the first NCAA team to start 5 black players.
Right.
There's a lot of controversy. How could you do that? You can only do 2 or this number on the road. And it was a great story. And to beat Adolph Rupp, which was probably where my real dislike for Kentucky began, was so they get honorable mention. I don't know how to pick a UCLA team, but with that number of championships, there has to be a UCLA team. So I went to the 71-72 Bill Walton team with Jamal Wilkes and Henry Bibby because they were 30-0 and they averaged winning their games by 30 points.
Wow.
So I'm going to say that they deserve honorable mention. And then my last honorable mention, because he would, again, so we've got Kemba, we've got Glenn Rice, David Thompson from NC State, where NC State wins the national championship. This is the 73-74 season by stopping UCLA's run of 7 championships in a row. And so, David Thompson, college basketball, probably going to be, I'm almost there already. Austin Carr, who played for Notre Dame, among my, and then probably it's going to be Pete Maravich. So there are my 5 already for another show.
Yeah, you started another program. My honorable mentions, I only had 2, were the UConn team of 2023-24, and I didn't include them because of how badly they beat everybody. It just wasn't
monstrous.
Not being if I was a UConn fan, they would probably be my favorite UConn team, even more than Kemba, because those games would be over by halftime. And they were a lot of fun to watch, like Cam Spencer and Klingon and Carapan and Newton. Like, they were a good group of and Castle. Like, it was just a great team. And Danny Hurley was just losing his mind on the sidelines, even when they were up by 30. And then, kind of to your point on Kemba and Glenn Rice, I was thinking of including this team, but if we do another video later on, of our favorite players, it'd be more appropriate there. Greg Oden in the 2007 Ohio State team. I was going back and watching the highlights. Boy, did he look like Shaq. It is crazy. Just really unfortunate the way his career with the injuries. But
was the backcourt guy Aaron Kraft or
Aaron Kraft is a little bit later, but he did have a great backcourt mate who's still playing in the NBA, Mr. Mike Conley Jr.
It was Mike Conley, right?
Yes, and people thought at the time, he was drafted 4th overall, that he was drafted too high, but look at him now. He's had off the top of my head, the 2nd best career of anybody in that draft, behind obviously Kevin Durant. I could be wrong about that. There could be someone I'm forgetting about. But it was Conley. It was Oden. I don't really remember the rest of the guys on that team. They lost in the national championship game to Florida. I was a huge Greg Oden fan. I really thought he was going to be the next Shaq, and it just his legs just didn't support his body.
Jack, who was the guy that Portland drafted over Michael Jordan?
Oh, Sam Bowie. So they did it twice, unfortunately, for Portland fans. You got and both times, kind of understandably so. Maybe I don't know about Michael Jordan. I wasn't alive, so it's hard for me to say what the conversation was like. But I do remember Greg Oden, Kevin Durant. And with Kevin Durant, even though he was awesome at Texas, there was a lot of controversy about the fact he couldn't bench 185 pounds one time. Blah blah blah. How good could he be if he can't do that? And Greg Oden just, he went to the national championship. He looked like he was going to be the next dominant big man. And that time in the NBA, it made a ton of sense. And just unfortunate that he just was never healthy. But yeah, Portland, tough run of luck, I guess. A bad luck would probably be better to put it. And that's going through multiple GMs and, etc. So yeah, 2 times they've had that happen.
Well, and before people start yelling at me for my 5 favorites, yes, somehow you have to squeeze into 5, would absolutely have to be Bird and Magic, because that was another game that changed and was transcendent. It was, but having the 2 of them play against each other, the eyes on the game, and then their eventual ascendancy to the NBA was one of those very magic moments for college basketball. Everyone wanted to watch, and Larry Bird was just outmanned. The Michigan State team was just better. They had, Magic had more options, and Larry just couldn't will his team to a victory. But for another show, we can talk about our favorites.
Favorite players, favorite games.
Favorite players, favorite games, but favorite teams. So, Jack, to sum it up, your 5 were?
My 5 were Auburn, 2025, Duke of 2015, Wichita State of 2013, Kentucky of 2012, and UConn in 2011.
And for me, it was Duke in 91-92, Arkansas in 93-94, Phi Slamma Jamma Houston in 82-83, the Fab Five, which did lose to Duke, but obviously the 91-92 season, and UNLV, which was 90-91. So you're right that there's that 2-year period where 3 of my 5 favorite teams played in that. So, but it'd be great to have everyone else's opinion. You can tell us we don't know what we're talking about, especially me. He knows what he's talking about. Absolutely. Throw it in the chat. Let us know what you think.
And let us know. Do you guys want to hear our favorite players, favorite games, any other ideas? Drop them in the comments. Until next time, guys. Peace.